All right, today we're gonna look at the CD1, not this one in particular. It's actually gonna be one of the Crush Boys ones, but I'll talk about this one too. The ESP Undertaker and the MVP Tesla. And we're gonna see how they all fly against one another and figure out what to use them for. Let's go. Okay, so hole one, starting off with the Tesla. And so I throw it out on flat, out to the right, expecting that really reliable fade. And that's pretty much what you get even into a headwind. I think it would have flown that way. But having warmed up with the Undertaker, I threw it on hyzer. And so I'm expecting a bit more flip up, but it doesn't really. It only pushes to about 345, 350. With such low arm speed behind it, it never flips into a flat or a turn. Whereas the CD1, now you see it does flip up flat, but again, only pushing to about 350, 360. It doesn't actually go into much of a turn. It just kind of like drifts straight for a while and then goes back into its fade, never really has a huge skip. And then we went into hole two. So I threw the Tesla out again with its stability flat and out to the right, expecting a really big swing, which it has. And so I will say that it's just a really reliable kind of give it all you've got kind of disc. Whereas the Undertaker, that one, again, went to go flip it up to flat, but not enough hyzer. So it flips up and you see going with the grade of the hill also, it just holds that line and kind of never has enough to fight back out at the end. Whereas the CD1, because I'm also more familiar with it, I was able to put it on a bit more hyzer after that mistake. It flips up, carries straight, and holds the hyzer very, very straight for a long time, and then has that super just nice finish. Then we go into hole three. Now this one's meant to be a slight like flip up to turn out towards that basket. And so the Tesla didn't do it at all unless you put it on a massive hyzer angle and you push it really hard. Whereas the Undertaker, that one is the idea of what someone might want on this hole, since that tree is blocking a wide hyzer. And the CD1 does that. I just released it out to the right, but it has that same flight where it flips up, has a nice drift. It's just such a beautiful flight, this and the Undertaker. And then we get into this 500-foot downhill hole. I'll highlight this little strip of land that's inbounds. And so the Tesla, I actually put this on anhyzer angle, and even then down the hill, it still fights out and then finishes there short, but on the island. So again, really stable disc, like reliable, but just not in the same class of flight as these two. And so with the Undertaker, through that one on hyzer and downhill, you see it flip up flat, which is what I want, but maybe a bit higher, and it holds straight and just finishes straight, which is such a good shot. Like, it just feels good in the hand. And then the CD1, same idea, just kind of corrected a little bit more. Flip it up, you see it pushes straight, just amazingly, great disc. And then holds, and then has that really just like nice little dumpy soft fade at the end. Never has any really kind of flare once you're pushing it over 360. The next hole, you're kind of pinched in between this tree and the tree up to the left, so you need something that's gonna flip up and flex out right and then come back. The Tesla, this is gonna have to be a forced turnover. It's not that flip up kind of disc. Maybe for someone like Simon it is, and it still just has so much stability, it fights out too early. And then the Undertaker, through this one on the line you're kind of wanting, it just needed to be higher. And so you see it's just this nice slight hyzer, it flips up and starts turning. And so then with the CD1, you throw the same exact shot, just slight hyzer, and you see it with the right height, does the same flight as the Undertaker, flips up, turns out around that tree, fights back into that nice fade. And then we go into this like 310 feet, so we're just gonna try another little slight turning or a forced turnover. You'll see pretty quickly, put it on forced turnover, and you see it fights out to about 280. So a little bit inside circle one, it dumps out a little early, so you can put a bit more on it than you might expect. The Undertaker, same idea, or it was a little flat, but didn't give it enough. It pushes up, has that nice turn that you're expecting out of this disc that we've seen, and then pushes out to about 15 feet from the basket. And the CD1, once you see that the flip up doesn't take some of the energy out of the disc, the majority of the flight's going to be spent on this turning angle, and it doesn't really fight back until the end where it barely straightens out. This next hole, I threw this Tesla flat to anhyzer angle so it could push out to the right and then fade back in, but it being so overstable, and so it still just fights back and dumps into the ground earlier than expected. Whereas the Undertaker, that one you see flips up, pushes out over that dirt road you'll see on the right, and then fights back into a fade right near the basket, like about pin high. But you can see that just like you can error too low with these, you can error too high, like with the CD1 here. It did flip up to flat and turn, but it was so high it had too much room for all of that movement with its fade. And so this final hole, use another example of trying to hit a gap up to the right. And so you see that the Tesla, even when put on a forced anhyzer angle and thrown with a lot of torque, it'll hold this angle the whole time and never really turn over like the other two would. And you'll see it just has that little fade at the end. Whereas the Undertaker, this one, I expected it to have a bit more turn, so I hyzered it, and you see it flips up, but for some reason I just must have put too much hyzer on it. It didn't actually turn out into that open area like I would have wanted. Whereas the CD1 was the exact shot I wanted for the Undertaker, just more right. And so it was a nice hyzer, flip up, just beautiful glide, like really glidey discs. Turns out just a little and then fades back into the middle, just like the Undertaker did, just into a better landing spot for the hole. And so my overall thoughts are that the Tesla is the wind version of these two, you could say. It's just more stable. It makes sense for guys like Simon why they like it so much. It's flat. It feels like you could just do a lot, like you could yank on it really hard and it's gonna like handle whatever you put on it. Then the Undertaker and the CD1, to me, pretty much fly the exact same. They have about the same profile. The Undertaker, yeah, they both just have a slight bit of dome, just a little. The rims feel just as deep as the other, or just as wide. It's just like, they're almost the identical disc. This is just an ESP plastic. And the CD1, that Crush Boys one I was throwing, is a bit more used than this. And so it has a bit more turn. So that ESP Undertaker flies a little slightly more stable than my used Crush Boy CD1. Let me know what your guys' experiences are, or any other 9-speed discs you think are really good and worth comparing. So thanks again for watching, and see you next time.